Hey folks, welcome back. Since the 1990s, I've been talking about one of the ways to end poverty in South Africa is to focus on the poor. I know that sounds silly, but think about it. The poor are not black, they're not white, they're not brown, they're poor. And the solution to that, of course, first is safety and security, public policing, abysmal in South Africa. Second, of course, is to provide proper education, not teachers that prey on prepubescent teenage girls for grades, handing out grades for having favors. And the third way is to make a national sovereign wealth fund. Well, that horse is bolted from the barn. We're not going to get a national sovereign wealth fund for South Africa. But I've been making the argument for a long time that South Africa's programs are not focused in the right way. Specifically, not those programs for the poor, but the things that are pushing people into poverty among policies in South Africa. One of the things is broad-based black economic empowerment. The argument goes that BEE is meant to uplift South Africa's poor black population, but it is done completely opposite of, because it's a patronage program that favors the friends and the connected of the powerful and the wealthy. And so instead of enriching South Africa's poor black population, it's perpetuated and extended poverty from about 10 or 12 million people max under the National Party to today well over 30 million black South Africans living in abject poverty. Now that is a horrible accomplishment on the part of South Africa's government, led for the past 3 decades plus by the African National Congress. But today, in South Africa's parliament, the Democratic Alliance is introducing a bill which seems like common sense and something I've talked about over and over again, but I'm going to have to give them credit for getting their act together. They're introducing a bill that says that broad-based black economic empowerment needs to be replaced for procurement with people focusing on not race, but on poverty. Those who should receive favor and benefit from the state should be done so not on the color of their skin, but rather on means testing, something I've talked about for a long time. When I suggested a National Sovereign Wealth Fund back in the 1990s and ever since then for South Africa, I talked about a fund that with stakes in Old Mutual and Anglo-American and Denel and Armscor, when these things are actually functional companies, they would get shares that would go into that account or bonds and that sort of thing. The income generated off that dividend revenue and then the capital gains could be reinvested where necessary, and then whatever was distributable could be done on a quarterly basis or maybe more frequently, and it would go to South Africans as a payment, kind of like the Alaska Fund. In Alaska, because of the oil wealth of the state, residents of Alaska get an annual payment. This year it's $1,000. 30 years ago it was as much as $3,000 plus a month, or a year. But this year it's $1,000. So residents of Alaska benefit from the natural wealth that's generated in that state directly, individually. Every adult gets $1,000. It's awesome. South Africans could add the same thing. And since the poor really needed a hand to be lifted out of poverty, one way to do it would be the means test. Generally speaking, I'm not in favor of means testing, particularly in a progressive taxing scale. But in this case, a unique situation in South Africa, it would have been brilliant and could still be brilliant that those who are at the bottom of the ladder, on that very last rung, could get a helping hand. And it would also build an ownership society. But that's out the gate. We're not going to say that horse is bolted. We're not going to have that National Sovereign Wealth Fund. But still means testing for benefits. So, for instance, I went to university in America, not because I'm wealthy, not because of generational wealth. There was none of that. But I went to university in America on a student loan, qualified for on the basis of abject poverty, extreme poverty. I went on a state grant from Ohio and a federal grant from the U.S. government. All of those means together, plus working part-time in the cafeteria and on campus, making minimum wage, helped me make enough money so that I could go to university. Means testing. The poor get help. That's how things should be done. So the same thing in South Africa. Student bursaries should be given to people not based on the color of their skin, but based on their need, if they qualify for university. You can't just let everybody go. You need to qualify. So you qualify, then you get means tests to get assistance from the government. That's the way things should be. And it's the same thing when it comes to many other aspects. And it looks like the Democratic Alliance is now proposing a bill that will address exactly that. Now, here's what happens. The Democratic Alliance is a partner in the so-called Government of National Unity, which is a joke. It's a grand coalition that the ANC has put together in violation of the bilateral agreement that those two parties had to form a government in a coalition of ANC-DA. in order to give themselves top cover and not take a lot of flack from the rest of their tripartite alliance, which is falling apart, and also from their own party members. The ANC, clandestinely went and talked to these other 8 parties, said, hey, come join us, and handed out patronage positions to them in cabinet rather than focusing on the 2-party coalition. So the DA and ANC are not a monolith, and they don't agree on everything, and this is a perfect example of it. It's shocking that it takes until 2025 for some politician in South Africa to say, hey, here's a bill, let's means test these benefits that accrue to South Africans. Let's not give it to people because they're black or they're brown or they're white, because frankly, that's morally reprehensible. It's also racist to give someone favor or disadvantage based on their skin color. And this approach is healthy, fair, and legitimate. It's long overdue, and quite shocking that we have to wait till 2025 before some politician in South Africa goes, hey, we should be means testing. Now, again, I'm not in favor of means testing, generally speaking, but South Africa is historically an exception. It's an unusual case, and this is a sound approach. It's certainly a much better approach than the racist, broad-based black economic empowerment, which discriminates unfairly against whites. And while Indians and coloreds are included as black under this racial code designation the ANC uses, they aren't treated as black when it comes to handing out tenders and contracts to private businesses. They are pushed aside and ignored almost as often as white South Africans are. And this is the law. But apartheid was the law too, and nobody was breaking the law by enforcing separate development. That was morally reprehensible in many people's eyes. And BEE should also be morally reprehensible because it is not uplifting anybody except enriching those connected to powerful elites in the government. What say you, South Africa? Would you agree? Has the DA finally gotten their act together? Are they finally standing up for South Africans after being silent on the Bella bill, being silent on national health insurance, being silent on expropriation without compensation, taking virtually no public action, and not standing for these things? In fact, members of their own government, their own party who are in government, like Dean McPherson, actually making ridiculous statements like nil compensation is compensation. Dean McPherson needs to go back to school or maybe learn English better. With a name like McPherson, you would think he would understand English. Nil means zero. Look it up in the dictionary, brother. So, the DA, are they on your side? Sounds like, at least politically, they're trying to be on your side. But you have to decide, South Africa. Municipal elections coming up in 2026 or early 2027. What will you do? What say you, South Africa? Mzansi. Cheers.